All right.
Keith Michael,
Yes.
I have a few questions for you. Who had the most influence on your career in the theater, and how did that influence manifest itself?
Well, the answer to that question is very, very simple. A fellow by the name of Robert Porterfield, who was the producer of the Barter Theater in Virginia. I was an art student, and I was going to school in Pennsylvania, and Bob Porterfield was on a Columbia lecture tour, and I had never been in a play, and this was the first play I had ever been in, and it was a dress rehearsal, and he sat in on the dress rehearsal, and he said, "Why don't you come to New York and audition for me?" I couldn't believe that. I mean, I'd never been to New York. This was a little kid from a town called Muncie in Pennsylvania. So I went to New York, and they gave away what was called the Barter Theater Award. Well, I stood outside the Booth Theater in a line that must have included 50 or 60 actors, all wanting to win this award. So I got to the stage door. I didn't even know what these actors were talking about. I got to the stage door, and the producer or the stage manager said, "Oh, you're Keith Michael. Yes, Mr. Porterfield would like to see you after your audition." I was astonished. I mean, we had 1 minute for an audition. Bob Porterfield said, "If it's good, it'll seem like a minute. If it's bad, it'll seem like an hour." So I met Mr. Porterfield after the audition, and he said, "I'd like you to go with me or with my company to Luray, Virginia. I have 2 traveling companies. I want you to go to Luray, Virginia as the juvenile in that company." As you people know, there was a juvenile, an ingenue, a leading man, a leading woman, a character man and a character woman. The leading man, incidentally, was the fellow who later took over the Barter Theater, Rex Partington. So that was the beginning of my career. And if you want to know who was the most influential, there's no question it was Bob Porterfield. Later, people like Oscar Brockett, who was my mentor and my wife Marion's mentor at University of Iowa. But those were the beginning people, surely, that were most influential in my life.
What have you seen as a positive change in the theater in your lifetime, and are there negatives?
Well, there's no question, I guess, that the most important thing in terms of changes was technology. Technology made an enormous difference. Now you could hear all the actors and so on and so forth, actors who had not learned to project. That was one of the great advantages. One of the big disadvantages is that those same people who now you can hear, you can't see them anymore because frequently they're either in profile or more often than not turning upstage. And as you people know, anybody who is, if you want to really hear somebody, you've got to see their facial expressions. And if you can't see the facial expressions, it's all gone. So that was in terms of technology, lighting, and amplification of the voice. A very well-known director at the Barter Theater. One time, long before this, I asked him. I said, "Owen," his name was Owen Phillips. In your lifetime, this was a similar question. What has been the biggest influence in terms of directing? And Owen looked at me and he said, "Keith, you won't believe this, but I'll tell you what I think it was. Pantyhose. For the first time, women could now cross their legs on the stage without worrying about whether there were going to be garter straps showing or anything else showing." So he said, "Honest to goodness, I mean it, pantyhose." So if you talk about the most important lighting changes in the 20th century, I suppose the most important changes was, number one, amplification of the voice and lighting, of course, and pantyhose. Those were the most important changes in the 20th century, and I was all part of that.
What is the best piece of advice you were ever given, Did or didn't you follow it, and what were the consequences?
Well, I guess the best piece of advice I ever got, aside from, well, implied going into the theater, the best piece of advice, when Marion and I graduated with our MFA degrees, this was we were at the University of Iowa. At that point, there were only 3 universities in America that gave the MFA: Iowa, Yale, and Carnegie Tech, Carnegie Mellon. Well, we had a chance, Mary and I had a chance to go and head a theater in South Carolina. And we went to Arnie Gillette, who was heading the theater at Iowa, the MFA program, well, heading the whole theater program at Iowa at that time. And we said, Arnie, what should we do? And Arnie said, go to Europe, go to Europe. You can get a job anywhere, but go to Europe. So we went to Europe. We went to Bristol, England, and where I, having had the GI Bill, I had spent 4 years in the Navy and had the GI Bill. We went to Europe, we went to the University of Bristol. I ultimately did my PhD at the University of Bristol, but more important than that, my PhD involved theater architecture. We visited exactly 70 theaters all across Europe. This was Western Europe now. 70 theaters. We saw productions in those theaters. We talked to the architects of those theaters. We talked to the intendant or whoever was supervising the theaters. That was the best advice we ever got. The second best advice, of course, was to go to Indiana. And we got that from, well, a number of the people, because they were starting a new program as in most universities, the theater program was part of the speech and theater program, and we were separating it out. And the question was, we were offered the job, thanks to Oscar Brockett in many ways, and the question was, shall we go or shan't we go? And we decided we should go, and it happened. So we got here, and it could not have been a better move than, I can't imagine a better move. Let me tell you that our experience in education could not have been better. Students are wonderful. They're just wonderful. And if you are a good teacher and you like the students and the students like you, I can't imagine a more fulfilling experience in your life than that.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. And congratulations on a long and successful career.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael.